Hi, I'm CJ and this is my RC channel. Okay, I'm just laying out parts here, and again, everything is very much like the last time, doing the rear end. Most of this stuff is identical, just getting some stuff laid out. And for this build at stock, or for the build I'm doing, 2.5 is the same front sway bar. So I went ahead and bolted down the front suspension bracket. We've got good motion, everything's smooth. I didn't actually end up reaming these out because I decided before I did, since they were so tight, to go ahead and just test these inserts to see if they were smooth enough on their own. And as I mentioned in earlier, it might have been in the previous video to this, when you're trying to make adjustments, you always want to, for pins, make fitting adjustments. You always want to go at the widest points. So I've got a good thing set up there. So now I've got to put together the pinion gear bracket and drive, and so we need that thin washer just right here, and that goes onto the pinion. And we have a pair of bearings. The biggest bearing goes towards the pinion itself, and that passes through the rear of the pinion block, and then we slide the smaller bearing onto the front. Now if you recall, this has two positions, right side up and upside down, and basically that means high and low for the pinion gear, and how that where it impacts the gear. So if you're looking at it, low might be like, high would be like, let's say here, whereas low would be down here. Now we're talking a fairly small amount, but I think the impact is less where the gear hits the where the pinion hits the ring gear, as to the angle of the drive shaft. And if it, you know, a high drive shaft versus a low drive shaft, that might have an impact on torque on the chassis. I don't know. I'm going to try and get some info on that. I got a few questions I'm going to ask tech support when I give them a call, and trying to learn a little more of the ins and outs. And I also mentioned that the build that I am working toward, which I'm emulating, I don't have all the parts for it, because what he did, he was running the high medium, because there's another block like this where the difference between high and low isn't as much. In other words, the pinion is closer to the center line, and so you end up with four possible. If you have both blocks, you have four possible positions instead of two. Now they're $30 a piece for these blocks, and you would, to emulate that build, you would need two, because he's running the same setup at both ends. I'm kind of curious as to how much effect that really has on the car, and exactly what effect it has, and is it noticeable enough and an improvement enough that $60 worth of new aluminum blocks is going to be worth the purchase. So that's something I want to learn about, and I'll put a segment in the tuning videos on that. So, also I've still got to get some diff lube, because he's running a substantially lighter diff lube up front. I expect these to loosen a bit, but the front diff is really stiff. The stock kit comes with 1 million, I forget what the what the numbering on that is, but anyway, it's the number is 1 million and 80,000 in the rear. Now the 80,000 is the thicker, so the higher the number, the looser the diff, the thinner the grease is. He's running 30,000 in the rear versus 50. So he's running a really, really stiff rear end, almost, you know, probably very close to a locker kind of setup. And he's running 150 million up front. So 50% lighter than the stock recommended fluid. And so in the rear, he's running almost 3 times thicker. So that's a big change. You know, that's a very loose front diff and a very solid rear diff. And that sounds actually good to me. Having the, you know, more power going to the rear wheels, having almost a locker differential in the rear for straight line acceleration, and a very light front diff so that turning is nice and nimble. You know, I just don't know how some of this stuff impacts. For example, having a lighter front diff, what does that affect when you're talking steering? Does it make turn-in easier? And how does that affect hard acceleration coming out of turn? So if you're still turning, but you're almost out of the turn, and you're really cranking down on the throttle, you know, does that make the car, you know, want to straighten out and pull a straight line? Or, you see what I mean? So these are all things to that I'm going to try to find out about and or extrapolate through testing and talk to you guys about in various videos. So in any event, I'm ready to attach this. I've still got one more thing to put on here, and that is the outdrive itself. And then I need to put the grub screw in. So let me get that. That's this nice big one right here, just like the grub screws that go on the rear axle. That's the M5x4. Now, this is not an area where you need grease, and I'll explain. The bearings are doing, handling all the motion. In other words, this outdrive is not going to spin against the bearing. It is going to be up against the inner housing of the bearing that rotates against the bearing. So that is not a problem. And likewise for the gear itself, that is contacting its bearing as well. And then the outer ring of the bearing is contacting the aluminum blocks, front and rear. So that doesn't move. There's no grease needed there. So, and the bearings themselves are already greased and sealed. So we don't need to add any lubricant in this. This is basically now a sealed system, and doesn't need to be tinkered with or you know, require much maintenance in any way. Now, periodically you might need to clean the sealed bearings, but that's another issue. So our top 2 bolts there are going to be M310s, which is those 2, and we're going to need M320s to come in from below. Now, I'll start from below and just get these in place. Just get one started. I really like this kit. Everything seems to go together very nicely. A lot of thought has been put into the design. Obviously, this is not a first iteration. This has been evolved over years. And they've done some very nice things like making these differentials easy to access, remove, make changes at the track, things like that. You know, with this, you know, having this open like this, you pull a couple brackets and a couple things up here, and you can just pop that diff right out. You wouldn't even need to take off the axles. You could just pull the shafts out and off you go. So I need the two M310s up top. Again, none of these are tight yet. I mean, these are tight down here on the suspension, but the diff assembly, I'm keeping things a little loose right now so that I can get everything in. Okay, so now we need our two high. Okay, so the ones, there's two pairs, and this actually gives you the four ring pinion positions. You have high and low. See, another thing about the when I was talking earlier about what's the effect of that ring, you know, the possibly being torque inside, it also corresponds to the height of the differential. And so with this elliptical piece, you have two positions, the lowest and the highest. And these other twos, the ones that have oops. The separate pair that we cannot use with the existing hardware is let's see, there's high, low, and okay, you have H-L. That's the stock ones that work with the included pinion locator. Okay, then we have this other pair that say MH-ML, so medium high, medium low. And if you look at a pair of these side by side, you can see that this hole is lower, it's closer to the bottom than this one right here. See, it's much closer to center over here. So basically what we do, if we get that extra part, we have a 4 position possible for the out drives that come out of the diff. And that is depending on, let's say the ride height of the car is a constant. Okay, if the ride height is constant and we move and the wheels are all the same size, right? So the center stub is going to be the same height. If the chassis height, resting ride height is just a constant, no matter what else we're changing, the axle is going to come out at the same point. We are changing the relationship of the diff in relationship to the center of the wheel, where that drive shaft's going to come out. So we might have a drive shaft that dips down or that is up now, or it's centered or somewhere in between. That is definitely going to have an effect out here, because any angling, like if it's angled down, it's going to provide torque that's going to want to possibly raise the wheel. I forget exactly this. There's a lot of physics in all of this, and it's been a while since I've done this kind of stuff. But basically that's the big change there, is the relationship between the power output here, height-wise, and the wheel. The wheel height is a constant, so this is the adjustment on the inside that we're making. And if that drive shaft is perfectly flat, we're going to get a clean power transfer to the wheel. If there's a difference in height, it can torque against this outdrive here. Okay, so that may make the car want to squat under acceleration or lift under acceleration, depending. Okay, so that's one of the big things there. And it's not an issue here, as I was possibly mentioning, because I don't think there's any tweak issues with the chassis. These chassis are pretty solid. We've got our drive gear right here, and the action there isn't gonna, it's not gonna bend this aluminum chassis up or down. So the real effect is gonna be at the out drives here, powered to the wheels. So anyway, I'll find out what I can, and we'll cover that later. I'm gonna go ahead and put these two in one of the many empty Ziploc bags and save them for later. And these are the same front and rear, so if you need to replace a piece, it's going to be the same piece, front or rear. But these pieces that I took off earlier, those are strictly for the front, so I'm going to go ahead and take a little piece of this tape and make a label to put on this bag. And I did the same thing for the rear parts, as you can see. And I just need to figure out what I did with the, there we go, there's my fine point red Sharpie. And for those of you who are curious as to when I am doing this, I broke off earlier to watch the SpaceX launch. America now launches our astronauts into space again. That is fantastic. That was a beautiful thing to see that rocket go up and not have any issues. And tomorrow morning they should be meeting up with the International Space Station. That's going to be a beautiful thing. So these are, let's see, how do they just call them front inserts. Okay, done. And I'll just throw these in one of the other bags. Although these are the ones I'm going to use. I already bagged up the other ones. Okay, so let's see. These guys face outwards. Okay, and is there anything I need to think about as I'm doing that? Looks good, so let's see if I can just snap these guys in and without having to loosen the uprights like I did last at the other end of the car. No, I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. I think it just makes it easier. Okay, what I'm doing is I am loosening the diff brackets to help make this a little easier to snap in place. Those things are a pain. Okay, I guess I'll do what I did the last time, which is actually just take this off and assemble it off the front. And when I haven't been watching the launch, while I've been working, I've been watching the first Fast and Furious. A little campy, a lot campy, but a fun movie. An action-packed thrill ride. And hey, it's about cars. And after that, I am going to switch over to a classic car racing movie, the original Le Mans, which was filmed in France with real cars, in particular the Porsche 917, which was just an amazing car. If you want to see something neat, go on to YouTube, which you are, and when you're done watching my video and you've clicked like and you've subscribed to my channel if you haven't already, go and search for Porsche 917 Startup and listen to the sound of what that car sounded like, because there's somebody who's got an original in storage and they pull it out and fire that bad boy up, and wow, that would be amazing to take that around. So what I did was I wanted to get these plastic things in position. They are a little tight, they may wear in. There's a notch in it and there's a notch here, and by sliding this keyed piece in this way and pulling here and down here at the same time, it helps snap that into the larger rear piece. And same thing on the other side. And so, oh, I got that wrong. I need this in the high position. Now, before you run out and invest in the medium for medium high, medium low, an interesting thing to do might be to start with the start it in the high position as is recommended. Get familiar with the car so you can tell the difference when you make a change, and then switch to low, which would be from the highest setting to the lowest possible setting. Do some laps and try and get the feel for how that is changing the car. And understanding what it does, being able to recognize a change in the vehicle is a really big part of testing and learning your way around your car. So that going from one extreme to another extreme isn't the way you want to tune. In other words, if you're trying to solve a problem, you want to make small incremental changes. But when you're trying to learn what a specific type of adjustment will do to the vehicle, going from one extreme to another can be a very good way to go. Let's see, that's the side, there we go. Yeah, that's definitely, I mean, it involves taking the car further apart, but it really helps to be able to use that double squeeze technique. It helps rotate this plastic thing into place. Okay, so now I can drop this into place like that, and I can start the screws from below. Okay, I should tighten those down until I've got the frontmost ones started at least. Depending on how long I'm at this tonight, there's another car racing movie I may watch, and it's about Paul Newman. It's kind of a documentary about his life as a race car driver outside of being an actor, and it's a really good movie. There's a lot of race history there, and you might enjoy that if you go looking for it. You can buy it on Vudu. I'm not sure if it's on Netflix, I forget, but I own a copy of it. That's how I have it. Okay, let's see. Get that ready to go. And as long as you're searching for that Paul Newman movie, there's another couple good ones. One's called Journey to Le Mans, and another documentary is called The Gentleman Racer. It's about, has to do with Le Mans and endurance racing in general. A lot of the teams will have several professional drivers, and then they'll have one reasonably well experienced amateur driver that they refer to as the gentleman driver. It's usually someone with an awful lot of money who can afford to pay to start racing. A lot of them tend to be a little older, you know, CEOs, company owners, people like that who can afford to dabble in racing. Okay, so to do this, we need to start with the bearing. So here's your method for doing the sway bars. You start the sway bar from either side, you put in the bearing, you follow the bearing with this little metal piece. I would start a grub screw at this point and get the grub screw started. And might as well get the grub screw in on this other one. Another good movie is Senna. It's about the life and racing career of Ayrton Senna before he was killed in F1. So then you put in the other bracket, and just like in reverse order, then you do the bearing, and then you can continue feeding the sway bar through. Okay, now that we've got all of this in here, I'm sorry, I need to move this light. I've got the sun coming in very brightly at this time of day, right in my face. So and this is a little tougher because of how small this inner section of the sway bar is. So I need to capture the grub screw and slide that metal piece in, seating the bearing, and at the same time tightening it down the grub screw. Now we're gonna have to readjust that because we want to center the sway bar in position. So at this point I'm going to go ahead and again get that grub screw, use this slot in the aluminum here to the bracket to push that grub screw in all the way, and center the sway bar best as possible by eye. Tighten the grub screw. Okay, now we can go back to the other side and readjust that. Okay, and you should have a very smooth moving sway bar with no left or right. In other words, you can't jiggle it this way, and it's riding on those bearings because it's attached to those metal fittings, and those are pinning the bearing up against the large metal bracket. So now you can attach the sway bar, and the two final grub screws go into these two fittings here to lock the sway bar in place at its ends. So now they move up and down smoothly, but if you hold one in position, you've got the spring of the sway bar. So that works exactly as designed. It's very nice. Okay, there's one piece left, which is that little O-ring that is going to go back here. I'm going to go ahead and drop that bag in here with the center diff, and now it is time to do the outer front suspension and the steering. And once that's done, it'll be time to move to the middle. So let me get the bag 6 out and opened and lay a few things out, look at a few steps, and the video will pick up in a minute, or I may end the video at this point and this will be onto another video segment. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel.